Today on the Maison Jeune podcast, I'm joined by Will Duffield, a UK-based residential house flipper who's quietly built both a serious track record and a loyal following in the property world. You may know him from TikTok or Instagram, where he documents the real side of flipping houses. I first came across Will's content while scrolling, and it stopped me instantly. In a space that often feels heavy on the highlight reels and light on honesty, his transparency stood out. No hype, just practical experience and a willingness to show the full picture, which is incredibly rare. In this episode, we unpack how he got started, what keeps him motivated, and what flipping houses across the UK has really taught him about risk, resilience, and building something sustainable. Now, whether you're into property, content creation, or the simple mindset it takes to bet on yourself, there's really a lot to take away from this one. So, please welcome to the show, Will Duffield. Where do we find you today, Will? Where have your adventures taken you?
So today we're actually recording from Bohol in the Philippines, so Bohol Island. So I've just been jumping off cliffs into waterfalls and having a great time in beautiful weather around amazing people. So it's a hell of an experience. So that's where I'm recording from right now.
That sounds like it. That sounds amazing. Are you in Airbnbs? Are you in hotels? How's all that working?
A little bit of both, actually. Yeah, it just depends what's available. So my fiance Chloe and I were pretty spontaneous, so we like to kind of combine a little bit of both. Depends on what's available. We kind of get up and just go somewhere if we feel like doing it. We don't plan too much ahead. But then, because we both work for ourselves, we both work remotely at the moment, we kind of want a little bit of stability now and again so we can kind of crack on and do some work. So we don't want to move hotels, Airbnbs every 2 days. That sort of, it's more like a week here, week there, a couple of weeks there, that sort of thing. So a bit of combination on what's out there, yeah.
Well, let's take us back to the beginning, because other people are going to think, how's he in the Philippines and he's flipping houses in the UK? Let's go back to the start. How did you get started flipping houses in the UK?
So I got started in property long time ago now, just over 17 years ago. I bought my first buy-to-let, and I suppose it just came about through doing a lot of reading and learning from not necessarily just property guys, but people that were succeeding in business. I became obsessed learning about entrepreneurs of the past and the present. I used to work in central London and live in southwest London, where I'm originally from, a place called Teddington. It was quite a long commute. So the great thing about that is I literally read a book every week, and it was all self-help, it was all personal development, and I immersed myself in it. And, you know, right from the kind of the tycoons of the past, Andrew Carnegie, John Rockefeller, Henry Ford, and then all the dragons that you've seen, you know, Peter Jones, Duncan Bannatyne. I've read all their books as well, and I just wanted to kind of learn what worked. How did these people succeed, and how could I follow it? I always knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. That was a given. I was far too stubborn to work for anybody else, so I kind of had to find a way to make it work. I came across Robert Kiyosaki, and Robert Kiyosaki, of course, is huge in property. He talks a lot about the value of building assets, and those assets can pay for what you then decide to invest. So rather than invest your capital, you invest your income from the assets that you generate. And I was just fascinated with the idea of doing that. I wanted to build a business where ultimately I could create this passive income, which I think in property is never entirely passive, but certainly it's recurring income, you know, that monthly income you can generate. And so I read a lot of Robert Kiyosaki. I think I've read most of his books now. He seems to have a lot of books, so I think I've read most of them anyway. And it was kind of that principle of property could enable this idea of wealth building and, you know, financial freedom. And so I got excited and I bought a buy-to-let, or bought a property at auction that was on a bridging loan. Didn't have much money when I got started. I paid 24k for the flat.
Wow.
It was in a pretty poor state even then, and it just got me started. I look back and I made some mistakes that I'd probably cringe about now, but it was the catalyst that moved me forward. So I started in buy-to-lets, and then it was later I actually got into flipping specifically, where I came to the realization that with flipping, as good as my buy-to-lets were, and I continue to build my portfolio now, flips could allow me just to move forward that bit more quickly, to leverage money from other people a little bit more easily as well, because you can pay people back quickly and high returns. So I started flipping, and it was actually flipping that kind of enabled me to build up a big capital pot. And then, of course, I use that capital pot to invest in more buy-to-lets and then achieve financial freedom that way. So it's kind of a journey, as it were, but started with buy-to-lets and then became more focused on flips as well as the buy-to-lets.
100%. Now, going from reading the Robert Kiyosaki book, which I agree is like a fantastic, almost a beginner's book, it's a really great general sense to get everything. There is rather a strong level of risk to say, like, okay, I've read a book. Now I'm going to dive into an auction. I'm going to get some bridging finance and buy my first thing. Surely this wasn't your first endeavor. Was there something that you'd done before this? Did you have a business before you started flipping houses?
Well, I did actually, yes. So I started, so my goal was being an entrepreneur. I didn't necessarily know what the vehicle was. So I didn't know how I was going to make my money, how I could make a living, but I knew being in business for myself would be the thing to do. So when I finished university, I went straight into recruitment, which is, or was certainly at the time, one of the best ways to earn big commissions and build up a capital pot relatively quickly, unless you've got really good skills and something that you're particularly good at. And that was pretty much the route. I'm not necessarily good at sales, but I could do it, and I learned the hard way and made mistakes, but I did bring in quite a bit of commission, and this was a way of me earning a bit of money. And about a year and a half later from doing that, I thought, this is great, but I want to start my own business. I've built up a little bit of a capital pot. I don't necessarily, at that time, it wouldn't be fair to say I wanted to be a recruitment company owner since I was 14 years old. I knew when I was about 13, 14, I knew entrepreneurship was for me, but it wasn't necessarily recruitment. I just wanted to be in business, and that's all I knew at the time. So that's what I did. I set up a recruitment company. It was in direct competition to my employer at the time, who actually was a really nice guy. I had no issues. I loved the company I worked for. It wasn't mine. So I set that up, and I was, at that time in my life, I was 23 years old, so I never read the newspapers. I didn't even watch the news. I had no clue what's going on, and this was the 2008 recession just started. So I set this business up literally within days. Boom, it was recession, and I was calling people up saying, have you got any vacancies I can recruit for? And there was company owners laughing at me, going, have you not seen what's happening? And I walked out, and I would see all these kind of highly skilled finance professionals just queuing up outside banks for jobs. What's going on? And I had no clue. And so I learned quickly, and I learned the hard way, that building a business then was tough. But I scraped a business together. I made a living. It was nothing spectacular. I hired a couple of people. It was really not through intention, but it was kind of a lifestyle business. I wanted it to be bigger, but I struggled to really get it to that next stage. But it generated some money. I used that money to invest in property, and long story short, I've tried other businesses as well in the past. I've set up e-commerce businesses, and I've aside from property, I've done other things as well. But it was the kind of recruitment thing that just got me started as an entrepreneur, and then that led to my first investment.
I understand, and I think that resilience of just deciding that you want to be an entrepreneur and keep going, and knowing that you're going to face obstacles in any field. I have a theory that all businesses are quite similar. You can change property to recruitment to e-commerce or whatever. It's the mindset behind it all that keeps it all moving forward. And you've clearly got that resilience, but where did you get all this ambition from? Because some of these are big, audacious goals. Was there someone in your early life that shaped your ambition, do you think?
Probably going to go down a little bit of a rabbit hole, but I think when I was younger, it probably started from, not necessarily negative, but I would say it probably started when I was young. I got kicked out of school, and I was a bad kid. I was in trouble all the time, and I think it was a catalyst that changed a lot in my life. So when I went home that day and I had to face my mum, who was devastated and she was in tears, I just remember going, shit, I need to change fast. So kind of at that point in my life, I went from getting predicted unclassified grades in GCSEs to then turning it around and getting good grades and going to a new school. And it was because I felt that I needed to change, and it was through seeing how much hurt I'd caused. It was this big, you need to do something here. And I think maybe I overcompensated. I've got to be, a high achiever, and I've got to do all these things, and only then will I matter. And I think maybe over the years I've tried to kind of look at that and go, well, you can also have fun in life as well. You can work without feeling guilty for not working, and there's a whole kind of bunch of things that come with that, balancing out this idea of being ambitious and pushing forward, but also not punishing yourself through working hard. So, but it was this catalyst that was a change. I went from being a very kind of naughty kid, arguing with everyone, arguing with all the teachers and getting kicked out, to then sort of smartening up or tidying up my act, as it were, in school. And so that pushed me towards probably at that point becoming a lot more ambitious, a lot more kind of determined and focused on everything I did. I changed quite a lot then. It started at about 14 years old. And then I took up boxing a little bit, actually, and boxing helped me, because I went from being really kind of like thinking I could, I don't know, thinking I was kind of, I could do anything and get away with it. And then I got in the ring sparring with someone who had 60 fights and I'd had none at that point. And of course I learned very quickly that I had to respect people and I got left around and I wasn't great. So, you have to kind of learn quickly. I did that for a little while, but that helped as well. I think a combination of those things sort of changed certainly my direction of my life, I suppose, at that point. It's a bit of a cliche here about people, boxing, changing their life and stuff, but actually for me, I think it really just helped me discipline and respect people as well.
I mean, that explains so much about the resilience. I think it's Mike Tyson that's got a quote where he's like, everyone's got a plan till you get punched in the face. And that's just what boxing is. Like, it would terrify me, but well done you for doing it. Let's talk a little bit about what you're building now. So I realize that you're obviously away in the Philippines and so grateful that you could come on and do this while you're away. But what is it you're concentrating on now with the creating content and flipping houses in the UK?
So I'm focused now on doing what I love best, which is buying and selling houses and trying to run that a little bit more remotely. So outsourcing, I've got a team in place, contractors I've worked with for years, agents I know very, very well to find good deals. So I'm running that as much as I can remotely. The time difference is a little bit tricky because, of course, here you get 8 hours ahead from the UK, so it's a little bit more tricky there. So I'm doing that for the most part, and I'm also building my content, which I share, which is ultimately helping people avoid the mistakes that I made when I started in property. So how you can avoid the pitfalls, the errors. And I've made a ton. I've definitely been that sort of person that's moved forward without necessarily having all the answers. That's something I've been good at, and then learning the hard way rather than overanalyzing, which I think some people can struggle with. But I've definitely, I cringe at some of the mistakes I made in the beginning. So helping people figure out the process of flipping property, how to remove the guesswork, get the clarity and the certainty that they can move forward and be successful. A lot of people that work with me are people that might be in a job they don't necessarily love, or they're lukewarm about. They maybe want to just create an income stream where they can replace that and ultimately achieve financial freedom. They're the type of people that I really like to work with, because for me, I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I've never imagined life as anything else. So there's nothing wrong with working for someone if that's what you want to do. But if you want to be an entrepreneur, there's part you're thinking, do you know what, I'd love to be in control of my day, I'd love to be in control of my calendar, get to choose what I do, and work that I'm really passionate about, which is, I'm fortunate to say, the position I'm in, then you don't want to go and work for someone else. You'll relate to that. So it's kind of working with those people, entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs that want to get out of that position and be in control of what they do. And for me, actually being in control of my calendar is one of the most important things of all. Maybe it's because I'm massively stubborn and I don't like being told what to do. Or maybe it's just that sense of freedom and adventure where you can just choose what you do and just not having to be somewhere at a certain time.
You were really open, and you're obviously so open in all your content about the stuff that you share, but what were some of the mistakes that you made early on?
Some of the mistakes I made early on, well, I have been, I would say, Phil, a big optimist generally, which can be a good thing when it just means getting started, when you don't have all the information, when everything's not perfect, just moving forward anyway. And that's been something I've been good at. But I would say that I get a little bit overexcited, especially in the beginning, about numbers, and I look at best case scenario. Yes, this property could be worth 300k because one person said it might be, versus 3 other people said it's worth 275, and maybe I should listen to them more. So I think in the beginning it's about really knowing your numbers, taking the time to work backwards in a very clear, concise way. So you understand the end value of a property. What's the refurb going to be? You get accurate quotations in advance. You then work backwards, your true buying and selling costs. So a lot of stuff that people forget about, of course, you've got your stamp duty, you've got your legal fees, you've got your holding costs, your finance costs, your utility. All these things will hurt you if you've forgotten about them. And then once they're in a spreadsheet, clearly defined, you can say, right, where do I need to be in order to lock in my profit day one? So before I even start the refurb, I know when I exit, there's profit there. And it doesn't have to be a massively risky game. Property is often called quite risky, but you reduce the risk when you've got the clarity in advance. So I think for me, it's what I see a lot of people making the mistake, myself included when I started, is getting a little bit excited on the numbers, not fully appreciating worst case scenario, fully appreciating all the numbers involved, and then working backwards to position yourself to put forward an offer where it's going to make sense for your time, your effort, your energy, refurbishing the damn thing in the first place.
Fantastic. And I think loads of people will be able to relate to that. Me certainly too. And that is part of the joy of being an entrepreneur, is that you are optimistic, and because you are trying an endeavor ultimately that's completely insane. You're going against the system to try something totally out of the norm. So I get that. I think most people that I speak to or see online, or they'll always say, I really want to do what you do. I'd love to get into property, but I just don't have the money. It's something I can relate to. There's loads of deals I look at that I think, well, physically, I don't have the money in my bank account to buy this. How do you feel about funding? I know you mentioned earlier about bridging finance. Do you still use bridging finance? Do you work with investors? What works best for you?
Well, for me, Phil, the preference now at this point is using my own cash or private finance. Private finance is more flexible. You know, you work with an investor, you can create terms that are mutually beneficial, and it's just a little bit less of a constraint than dealing with bridging. But don't get me wrong, I've done bridging a few times. If I had to, I would do it again, but I would prefer private finance. So I think with bridging finance, you just got to be a little bit careful. Sometimes bridging lenders say, yes, you'll have the money in 2-3 weeks if you're buying at auction. And I've been in the situation where that didn't happen before. A bridging company was late and I had to pay a penalty because of their fault. I had everything ready. And I've known other people in a similar situation. So you just got to be a little bit careful if you're buying at auction on bridging, just to make sure, if possible, if you can, try and push for 56 days rather than 28, whenever it's possible to do so. It's not always possible, but when you can. But anyway, private finance I prefer because it's just flexibility. You can say to someone, look, I'd ideally want to borrow this money for 12 months, but if I finish the project inside, say, 8 months, 9 months, would it be okay if I pay back early? And they've got the expectations managed from the outset. There's no kind of complications that are associated sometimes with a little bit more strict regimented terms for a bridging company that you're never going to probably speak to. So I do like private finance. You can borrow 100% of the deal, which is what I've done multiple times. Usually with bridging you can't, unless obviously you're offering additional security. You've got maybe a property or a buy-to-let, something like that, that's got no mortgage against it, so you can essentially offer that as security. If you haven't got that, you're going to be putting down a deposit. And when I started flipping, there wasn't many deposits there for me to kind of fund deals. I needed to leverage other people's money. So I absolutely think it's an essential part, well, it has been an essential part of my journey, leveraging other funds. It allowed me to move forward a lot more quickly than just relying on my own funds. It has sometimes it's difficult raising finance because a lot of people think it's just not possible. And they think, well, why would anyone loan money to me? You know, maybe I don't have enough experience, or, you know, I just can't imagine these investors are anywhere. Where do I find these people? And it's kind of like a belief system that you have to work on. You have to, because for me, I had the same feeling. I thought, well, why would anyone lend to me? And I came from this position of like, would it be possible to borrow some money, please, for this next deal? And, you know,
the Oliver Twist.
Pretty much,
please,
yeah. Like,
please, sir.
And I did, and it came down to kind of a lack of confidence, a lack of self-esteem of actually, no, I've got this. You know, I've got a good team, I've got time, effort, energy I can put into this process to find good deals that a lot of people can't, and so I'm delivering value, and finding investment is a value exchange. The more value you deliver, the more likely you've got an investor that wants to work with you. So if you've got zero experience or minimal experience, it's about going the extra mile to deliver on the promise of what you can offer, which is, for many investors who are hands-off, they don't have the time, they don't have the inclination to do what you do, is delivering and saying, yes, you know, this might be one of my early projects, but look at the comparables, look at the evidence, let the evidence speak for itself rather than just your words alone over-promising. You know, say, look, this house sold for this, I'm buying it for this. This is the equity that I'm locking in day one. I've spoken to these agents, I've got these comparables, I've got this research. You just kind of provide that evidence to your investors. So it helps, especially when you're starting out, you've got less experience, because I flipped a deal and I've never, you know, I raised money for my first flip from someone else. You know, I didn't put any money towards it, and I bought a couple of buy-to-lets or something, nothing major in terms of experience. So I know what it's like. It can be challenging, and you can almost talk yourself out of it. But raising finance for me, I'm a big believer in. But it's like a mindset shift. When I work with some people, they say, "Well, I just don't think I can do it." They think, do you think entrepreneurs can do it? Do you think entrepreneurs borrow money to set up their businesses? Do you think that's possible? Oh yeah, of course that's possible. Okay, so you are now an entrepreneur, you are now going out there, and you can find, if you find an amazing deal, a really good viable project, then that project is, even in, you know, when you're starting out, you don't have a huge amount of experience, the project kind of speaks for itself. Look, this is what I'm buying it for, this is what I'm selling it for, and therefore, you know, you can get moving forward even. Don't get me wrong, it helps, but it's not necessarily the be all to every investor. It's just a case of moving forward. And some people say, well, I can't raise money. I went to networking events, I asked a question, nobody was interested. I often say, well, how many people would you speak to? And say, 2 or 3 people. Well, you're not going to raise money then. This is a numbers game. Just as looking at houses, you might have to speak to 100 agents sometimes to find a deal. You might have to speak to 100 investors if you were willing. I think people look for certainty. I'm going off on a little bit of a rant here, but it's an important subject. Certainty is what they often look for. If you knew with clarity, making 100 phone calls to agents would bring a deal that made you 60k profit, in the next couple of months. Almost any of us would do that because we have the certainty. Call number 100, it's going to work, it's going to happen. But the reason we don't do it is we don't have that certainty. We're relying on it appearing later. But often the certainty is never going to be there. It's a case of it comes through actually doing the thing you need to do. It builds momentum, and then you get success, and then you want to do more of it. But it's just that initial getting started. And I think the same thing, is true with raising finance. You might have to speak to a lot of people. The first time you speak to them is the hardest, typically. It gets easier.
When people are starting out, would you say that, I understand completely what you're saying about private finance, but would you say that maybe joint venturing with an investor can be a good thing? Have you ever joint venture, where they would put up all the money, you do all the work, and then you split it? Or do you stick with like a fixed return to your investor? Do you think that's a good, viable option for someone starting out?
That's a really good question, Phil. So I've done both, and I recommend both. I always say to people, 50% of something, obviously it's better than 100% of nothing. So if you're in a position where joint venturing, doing 50-50, that is something I've done many times over. And I worked with an investor who had over £1 million to invest, and that was his preference, wanted to do 50-50. It worked out really well. We did several deals and worked with them over and over again, not just a one-off. So I think, if it's a 50-50 split joint venture, or if it's private finance, interest rate return, they both work. Generally speaking, obviously it depends on the deal. You as developer, if you're looking to raise finance from investors, you're probably going to do better with an interest rate return in most cases. You'll probably make a little bit more profit, but that should never distract away from the power and the attractive nature of just a straightforward 50-50 JV, because they can work really well. Investors often like them. They feel like they're kind of building an ongoing business with you with that 50-50 split. It's very clear, everyone knows where they stand, so it can work really well. I think the key is having a conversation with investors, seeing what their preference is, and that way just coming up with the best solution for you both.
If someone came to you online today, and let's say we'll build a person that they're 21 and they've got somehow £50,000, what would you advise them to do with that in today's market?
Pounds to get started, depends where they are in the country and what house prices are, but I'd probably say you're looking at using that money, or at least part of that money, don't necessarily use every single penny, part of that money to do a flip, to turn that 50k into 100, 150 and build a capital pot. I would be suggesting that even though they've got the 50k, that they'd start, assuming property is for them and they're interested in it, I would get them to start looking for finance now. They've probably got enough just to do that first deal, and that's probably about right. Some of the regions sort of 50k to do a first flip if you're using some form of bridging, or if you can find private finance for the rest of what you need, you can get going and do the first deal. But never let the comfort of having money in the bank stop you looking for finance, because there will always be a deal that comes along that you love that you can't do because you tied up all your money. It's almost like they do it on purpose. The universe, where it's like, here you go, here's a fantastic deal when you've tied up all your money, whether it's your money, whether it's investor finance, it always happens. So always be looking kind of before you need it. But 50k gets you started, but you'll soon want more. But that's what I would say. Do a flip, whether it's bridging or private finance, build the pot. Once you've got a significant pot there, again, depending where you're on the country, because house prices are different, but once you start building that pot, investing some of that in a buy and hold strategy, so that could be buy-to-lets, as in my case, I love my buy-to-lets. I invest in the northeast where property prices are relatively cheap, yields are high. Personally, that's a strategy that's worked for me, so I've just kept doing it. Or you might be somewhere else where HMOs might be the better option. Whatever you do, buy and hold, then builds that capital growth when you're holding property for a long time, and it builds that kind of recurring income that sets you free. That's that kind of near to it as possible passive income that you can then ultimately kind of fund your lifestyle and reinvest as well, whatever you want to do with it. But it means that you no longer have to trade your time for money, which is the goal after all. And so that's where I would go. Is a lot of people see me as the flip guy, because I talk a lot about flips, because I see flipping as one of the most challenging strategies to get right, and it's certainly what changed the game for me when I started figuring out flipping. But I'm a huge advocate of investing in buy and hold as well, and because when you are like me, traveling the Philippines or wherever else you want to be, loving life. You've still got some income coming in for your assets as well. And that is ultimately what means you're no longer having to kind of feel like you've got to rush back to trade your time for money.
Well, let's talk briefly about the content side of it. That's obviously how I found you. And you do, I mean, even in this small conversation, anyone that's listening is going to gauge that you are a very transparent bloke. There's no like bullshit or fluff to you. You're really to the point. At what point did you start thinking, I need to document this journey and I need to get this message out to other people?
At what point? Well, I don't know. Probably a couple of years ago or so, there or thereabouts, I started thinking about doing it a bit more seriously. I was dabbling with it, doing it around my full-time sort of property developer role, as it were. I just record an occasional video. But I just felt that at some point, I've got all this knowledge in my head. And when I started in property, I suppose, humble enough or whatever to admit that I didn't have all the answers. And I wish someone had just said to me, do this and follow this strategy and this is how you get it right. That would have sped up the process a lot more for me. So I think I can either keep all the knowledge in my head or I can actually share it, which I'm passionate about and I love talking about property, and share it with people that I then actually really enjoy helping. And the process of taking someone from struggling, trying to figure this process out, maybe thought about property for years, not done anything, to then moving forward, buying investments, securing their future, providing a better life for themselves and their family, is something that I really enjoy. So I kind of felt that was the motivation to get aspiring entrepreneurs out of maybe a situation not entirely happy with, to then be in control of their life. And that's something that motivated me, and it gets me passionate and excited to work with people every day.
Do you think that doing the content has helped you solidify your own methods and your own thoughts in property to help other people, still moving you forward to do better things in your own work now?
I absolutely think it is, Phil. Yeah, it's a good question. It definitely is, because when you actually start recording content and you start planning, how do I do this? What is my system? What do I do first? What's my order? What's the kind of hierarchy of tasks? If I've got a busy day, what do I prioritise? And then you start breaking it down, you go, yeah, when you start teaching it, you become a lot better at doing it, because you have to think about your process. And I'm definitely the sort of person that over the years has kind of winged it a little bit when I didn't know all the answers, and I've just pushed forward anyway. But when you do sit back and look at your system, then you break it down, then yeah, you've got to actually, this is my process, this is what I need to do each day, and it definitely maximises your output for sure.
Will, phenomenal conversation. I think there's loads of value here. There's loads of stuff in there that you've said. Thank you so much for your time. I've really enjoyed talking to you. Good man. Speak to you soon. Enjoy the rest of your trip.